You know, it's really a terrifying time and moment in our nation and the world. We're seeing the haunting echoes of Germany's ascent in the late 1930s, where an insidious and meticulously orchestrated campaign of dehumanization paved the way for the systemic extermination of the Jews. There, it wasn't just the genocide that was horrific, but the silent complicity, the tacit approval of the masses that let an entire ethnicity be methodically wiped off the face of the earth. Now, history threatens to repeat itself as we stare into this abyss once again, and that's what we're staring into. We're bearing witness to the deliberate conditioning and numbing of an entire society, and it's unfolding right before our own very eyes in real time. Young people, and I say it with emphasis, are being conditioned from a very young age to not only hate Israel, but to hate America, and to be silent when Jews are harmed. And what's even more alarming, America, this isn't in some far-off corner of the world, but it's right at the heart of democracy. It's in the people's house, and you should be concerned. Neetu Arnold is a fellow at the National Association of Scholars, Young Voices. Neetu, your thoughts on how we're becoming so desensitized.
Right. I think a lot of the university's response to this was quite awful. They were very readily prepared to comment on the death of George Floyd or the Russia-Ukraine war. But when it came to Hamas's attacks in Israel, where many people on their own campuses could have directly been affected by this, losing their family members or friends, they were silent. So it's absolutely understandable why there's been a donor exodus on this issue, and it's something to pay attention to.
Did you see what happened with the New York Bar Association, Lawyers Association, where the president resigned after the press release that they put out condemning Israel, but yet praising Hamas? Well, I just don't understand. You know these young people. Who's influencing them? Where they're getting their information and how they're coming to these conclusions?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is really taught in the classes that students are exposed to. I mean, I don't know if you've seen George Washington University had, well, this wasn't by the university, but there were student groups which plastered these very pro-Palestinian, very sympathetic to Hamas's attacks right on the buildings. And the Middle East Studies Center over at George Washington University, which receives federal funds, is still going to host some events. One is going to be providing context on the whole issue in Gaza, which is really just a way to diminish and deflect from the attacks in Israel against Israelis, against Americans, against many other people that were unprovoked. And then there's going to be a second event in November that's going to characterize Israel as this authoritarian colonizer. So this is, there's really a problem with the way universities teach these issues, where they're taking an oppressor versus oppressed lens to analyze world issues, and that's absolutely a problem.
But I want to go back. I want to go back to what Neetu said, which I think is critical. How these professors are indoctrinating these kids. I mean, if you look at what happened at Cornell University with the professor there, what he was saying is in support of Hamas, and when they were threatening to fire him, he backtracked. Not just George Washington University, Neetu, Georgetown University, right here in our backyard where we broadcast. Neetu?
Yes, and I think what's interesting about all of this is that everybody is now noticing, especially at Cornell University, Russell Rickford, the history professor, who said those vile remarks. When I was a student at Cornell University back in 2017, he was hosting a kneel-in and chanting Free Palestine, and yet there wasn't any outrage at that time. And so this is really a time for the public, for donors, to be paying attention to what's happening on campuses. Campus radicalization didn't just happen with this issue. It's been happening for years, and they really need to use the power of the purse to turn the tides, make sure that we can debate different ideas, that there is rigorous scholarship, and to ensure that when we're hiring professors, we're hiring them for their academic prowess and not for activism.
Neetu, you're there, you see it every day, you've experienced it. Why?
I mean, I think some of this is historical ignorance, and they're not really being taught both sides of this issue, or actually fairly. And on top of that, I would say that they're really not exposed to different views. So this is, again, a reckoning on ensuring that we really bring back rigor to our campuses, allow debate, allow different viewpoints, and making sure that administrators have a spine, that they're enforcing rules, that they are ensuring that everybody has a chance to speak and make sure that views are heard.
You know, I think that Dr. Ross Gunter makes an interesting point when he points out McDonald's and these other conglomerates, but I just had this epiphany. You know, we often like to talk about how Israel and Jews support all these institutions around the world and also in the United States. But let me tell you something. Obviously, many of these institutions must be getting money from the Palestinians, or for those that sympathize with it. Has anyone ever decided to trace the money to see the kind of support that places like George Washington and other places like Harvard that may get from people that are connected and strongly support Hamas and these organizations financially?
Actually,
go ahead, Neetu.
Sure. Actually, my organization, the National Association of Scholars, tracks foreign funding to universities, and I'm currently working on a database that really tracks this information. You know, the Department of Education does have this kind of information, but it's often spotty, it's not the most reliable, and so we're working on that right now. But there's a lot of money from places like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, so it is really important to first know exactly how much foreign funds are going to these universities, being able to trace who is actually funding these groups. And sometimes they're not even foreign groups. Sometimes these are from more liberal groups like Soros. So that was something that our report on the BDS movement.
Well, one thing we're going to do is once you get to the bottom of this, we're going to have you back, because we already know the Chinese have bought and paid for many of these professors and these institutions in this country. Neetu, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your voice. Dr. Ross Gunter, we wish you well. When we come back, we will be live on the ground from Israel. Don't go away.